He was a member of the Trilateral Commission, which is if we talk about the global north, this is their kind of grouping that wants to keep at bay anyone who's going to stop the progress of the global north's economy. So their actual mantra is that there's an excess of democracies.
Hello and welcome to The Conversation. Today I'm speaking to Crispin Flintoff. Crispin's the host of a UK political analysis show called Not the Andrew Marr Show, and was previously one of the Labour Party's biggest fundraiser organisers, having put on some 250 events. Welcome to The Conversation, Crispin.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So with the UK elections coming up in 2024 and a fairly tumultuous time under Tory party leadership, seeing some 5 prime ministers, the death of our head of state, Her Royal Highness, one pandemic, many Partygate inquiries later, it seems almost certain Britain will swing left and vote the Tories out and Labour in, and therefore Sir Keir Starmer. So who is Sir Keir Starmer and what is Labour today, as you have been a member since the 80s and fundraiser in the Corbyn times and through to today?
Well, thank you for asking me this big question. That people don't really know what the Labour Party is about and what Keir Starmer's about. Your question, you said leftwards, that it would go leftwards. Now, I don't actually believe that's the case. I think Keir Starmer's Labour is as conservative with a small c as the Cameron government of the 2010 to 2016. Is further to the right than Margaret Thatcher, would be further to the right than Margaret Thatcher. And I'll explain why that is. Now, I mean, basically, Keir Starmer was elected as Labour leader on the basis of 10 pledges that he wrote up, which were mostly social democratic or left in their principle, relating to the social policy, economic policy, foreign policy. Since he was elected in 2020, he has reneged on every one of those policies, and is on many policies more to the right than the Conservatives. If we're looking at fiscal responsibility, as in not spending more money than you've got, Labour is saying the Conservatives are spending too much money, they're not responsible with their spending. This would have been a line that the Conservatives would use against Labour for years and years. With the National Health Service, Labour's not committing to spending more money particularly. They're talking about reforming the National Health Service to make it more in partnership with private healthcare.
So
which
much
is another
like Boris
policy.
Johnson was being accused of preparing the ground for.
Well, exactly. There's no difference. If you watch the two parties talk about social issues like the NHS, there's no difference really between them at all. They just make out it's about how they run a bureaucracy, not changing the way the whole system is. Labour would not change how it's run. They just change the management of it. So as someone from the Labour Party, my dad was a candidate for in the general election in 1987. I was brought up in the Labour Party. I don't identify with Keir Starmer as a Labour person. Lots of people have turned off him who were in the Labour Party. Hundreds of thousands of members have left since he became leader. He has also expelled or suspended many members who have disagreed with his policies under the pretext of anti-Semitism, which is absolutely disgraceful, in my opinion, to use that as a basis for factional rule. And when we're talking about what the Labour Party would offer, a Labour government would offer, there's no difference to the Conservatives. So that's kind of the answer. But who Keir Starmer is an unknown. He was a lawyer who helped people who were in desperate need, like people taking on big corporations. He was one of these kind of lawyers. He then became the director of public prosecutions, so started to work for the state in a conservative government. He was a big mate of Cameron in some way because of that. He was a member of the Trilateral Commission, which is if we talk about the global north, this is their kind of grouping that wants to keep at bay anyone who's going to stop the progress of the global north's economy. So their actual mantra is that there's an excess of democracy. So they don't actually want people to be too active, individuals to be active in their democracies. He's also a member of the world. He's also been more keen on visiting the World Economic Forum than on being in Westminster. So he was at Davos last year, and he wants to be close to people like Rupert Murdoch. He's advised by Peter Mandelson. He has played it two ways on Brexit, where at first he was saying he wanted to be closer to Europe. Then when he realised that wasn't popular, he decided that he was a Brexiteer. And now he's sort of pretending he's both supportive of the EU and that he's not in support of the EU. So he's just trying anything he can to get into power.
It's a bit
so we
like
don't really
Boris
know
Johnson
where he is.
again.
Sorry?
A bit like Boris Johnson again. Lots of flip-flopping around on the Brexit issue and on whether we want to be part of the EU or not, or whether the UK wants to be part of the EU. That's quite
Exactly. And Boris Johnson has a reputation for being a dishonest politician. But in a way, the public knows he's dishonest. They know he's a bit of a buffoon. Whereas Keir Starmer wants to be seen as a man of integrity and honesty. And he's not really that person that he projects himself as. So
How far ahead is he in the polls?
He's 20% ahead in the polls, so he's miles ahead in the polls. There is often politicians do suffer when they get more scrutiny. He hasn't had much scrutiny. The media don't really interrogate him in the way they did Jeremy Corbyn, his predecessor. They don't ask him lots of questions that might embarrass him. They seem to be quite on his side. He's working the media quite well. I mean, as I say, he's been cozying up to Rupert Murdoch, and he's also other media. He's writing exclusives for them and helping them out so that they're friendly to him.
The big topic, obviously, today, and this will lead into the next question. This morning's news on Sky News, I was seeing they covered what Christmas looks like this year in Bethlehem, which is obviously very sad. And for the first time in history, there will be no Christmas tree in Manger Square to show support to Gazans and Palestinians. What is Keir Starmer's or the Labour Party stance on the current war?
Keir Starmer was asked fairly early after October the 7th if he thought it was wrong for Israel to stop electricity, water, food from going into Gaza, and he said that they had every right to do that, which caused a massive storm in the Labour Party, as well as many people campaigning angrily against Starmer. And because the thing is, as an opposition leader, he could have been in a good place to say, we've got to do something about this. Instead, he went along with the same story as Sunak, that Israel has a right to defend itself and therefore can kill and deprive people of living. So yeah, he's followed again. He follows what the wind is, especially what the US is saying. And there were massive protests in London against what the government's doing, but also lots of people are saying Starmer is part of this, what they're calling genocide. So he's not done this very well. Yesterday, he sort of made a statement saying he supports the UN's ceasefire, but it's a bit late. So yeah, he's not a very popular man.
Yes, well, thank you. But so in terms of foreign policy, you mentioned so he's US leaning, slightly flip-flopping on the EU side, but what can we expect from him in terms of foreign policy besides
Well,
the
he
current?
said he's 100% committed to NATO. Well, in my mind, NATO is an organization that's run by the United States. It's they lead it. So effectively, he's saying that he would follow anything that United States suggests for foreign policy. He's not taking any independent stance. I mean, if we look at what happened in Ukraine, Rishi Sunak spoke out against the use of cluster bombs. Keir Starmer didn't. So you can see that he's more loyal to the US than the Conservatives are.
Interesting. Is that very different to Labour under Corbyn?
Oh, well, I mean, under Corbyn, Labour would be calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. We would have been calling for no troops to Ukraine. We would have been calling for peace talks in Ukraine almost immediately. There would be no weapons would be sent to Ukraine, and certainly no assistance would be sent to Israel, which is the UK is doing at the moment, which is a bit under the radar, but they are doing that.
Interesting. Thank you. Okay, so as the UK gears up for elections, which we expect in the autumn of 2024, is that right?
Yeah, in the autumn or maybe earlier, but it's likely the autumn.
It's interesting that we don't have a date already. Anyway, in the mother of all election years globally, so some over 1 billion people are expected to head to the polls, with 76 countries globally having some form of change of guard, whether through free and fair elections or not. Where does the UK stand in this post-Brexit, post-COVID, and new Labour era? Likely, getting ahead of myself, but I suspect that's what's going to happen. Who are we? Who is the UK today in a new world order, really?
Well, I mean, there's a great potential for the UK to take this situation by the scruff of the neck and look at a new way of approaching things. But with Keir Starmer, we would just see more loyalty to the US, possibly a closer relationship with the EU than the Conservatives, but certainly no way of looking towards the global South and focusing mostly entirely on the North, the global North. We'd see Israel's support for Israel as we've seen already. It would continue. So it would be a rather depressing continuation of a situation that isn't helpful to anyone in this country, but also I think across the world. I think that the world order is breaking up, but we're clinging on to it when we could be looking at a way to adjust. So yeah, I'm sorry to pass on such a gloomy forecast, really.
Just ahead of Christmas, but I think it's important because I feel like a lot of Britons don't quite realise we're so busy with domestic politics and our economy, not only from the pandemic, but also from our own decision to break free from the European Union, possibly for immigration reasons, which we're now seeing effectively unfold between the Rwanda bill and other more drastic action than the UK has ever really implemented. I think they need to cull some 300,000, go down in numbers and reduce them in terms of entry, as the country is not capable of managing the amount of arrivals in its own population as it stands. It does paint a pretty picture. So what can we be hopeful for? What are the good news, if any?
Good news. You want me to give you good news? Well, the good news is that
we've still got a great sense of humor.
the good news is Tony Blair had a saying, things can only get better. They had a song, things can only get better. And that's really, people were singing that as they went to vote for him. I think now it's more, things can only get worse. People could sing that on the way to the polling station, because I can't personally see much that's good. But I suppose history is full of times when things get bad, but then they come back up again. And that's the hope that we've all got to have, that people will learn quickly that how things are, this world order that we have isn't working, and we have to change it. And maybe a bit more pain is needed before people come to that conclusion.
Thank you very much.